Hey guys, have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions, like how do I record an episode? How do I get my show into the apps all the people like to listen to? And how do I make money from my podcast? Well, the answer to every one of these questions is really simple. It's called Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. And best of all, it's 100% free and extremely easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. I've been using Anchor now for, almost a year, and I really enjoy it. It's a lot easier than any of the other podcast apps I've ever tried. And again, it's free, guys. It really is free. It doesn't cost anything. So if you want to get started on a podcast and making money doing it, then go to anchor.fm/start. That's anchor.fm/start. Anchor, the best way to podcast. Welcome to the new Ranger Report podcast. I am your host, Ben Dieter. Always glad when you decide to join us here on the podcast. You can find us at therangerreport.com, the Ranger Report on Facebook, on Twitter, and pretty much anywhere else that you can find things related to baseball. We have been gone for a while. Good to be back. Of course, we have a Patreon account. You can go over to Patreon, search up the Ranger Report, and please donate. Help us keep this thing on the air. Help us keep it going. Help us pick up better guests and some co-hosts and some other things we need to get going on to make this a little more enjoyable for you and your friends to listen to. So, a Rangers podcast, the Ranger Report podcast. I am your host again, Ben Dieter. Always glad that you decided to spend some time listening to what we're putting out here for you. So, let's talk about the 2019 baseball season. My initial prediction at the beginning of the season was that the Rangers would only win 64 games. I was wrong. The Rangers wound up winning 78 games, which is much better than 64 in case you don't know how that works. I'm happy to be wrong. I'm glad that I was wrong. I'm glad that the Rangers did a lot better than I expected them to do. What I want to do on this episode is break down a little bit of the good, break down a little bit of the bad and the ugly, and sort of look forward to an off-season that is coming up for us to figure out what do the Rangers need, what do they have to do. And, of course, goodbye to Globe Life Park, which is done now. The Rangers will no longer play in Globe Life Park. Starting in 2020, they will be playing in Globe Life Field right across the street. The new covered ballpark, but I will share my opinion on all of that on another episode later. If you would like to be part of that episode, go to our Facebook, go to our Twitter. I have put a link on there where I would like for you guys out there to leave us some voice messages on some of your favorite memories coming out of Globe Life Park / the Rangers Ballpark at Arlington / Ameriquest Field, everything it's been called over the years. And we would love for you guys to share some of those memories with us so we can put together a goodbye to you podcast, sort of reflecting some of the greatest memories we've had at Globe Life Park / the ballpark at Arlington. Of course, I have a lot that I'll share on that, and I'd like to save it for that, because now I would like to spend some time talking about the 2019 baseball season, which started out decent, got really good in the middle, and then the Rangers turned into the team we were afraid they were going to be in August and September, but still overall, not a disappointing season. We expected almost nothing from the Rangers this year, and they gave us more than nothing. At one point in the season, they were 10 games above 500, which was not something I would have predicted and did not predict at all for this team going into the 2019 season. New manager Chris Woodward did a good job motivating guys. The new hitting coach, new pitching coach, everything seemed to really catch on for the Rangers. We'll get into the good later, but Mike Minor and Lance Lynn obviously are going to be in that list. The bad, I think Rougned Odor is going to have to be on that list. I think Ronald Guzman and Nomar Mazara maybe took a step backwards. I also think that we had some pitching issues as well, but I think you guys already know that. And then, of course, the ugly, again, we'll have to talk about Rougned Odor. We'll have to talk about Hunter Pence not being able to stay on the field after his hot start. We'll have to talk about Joey Gallo not being able to stay on the field this year, even though he would have been part of the good, I think, had he not missed so much time at the end of the season due to injury. He definitely played a lot better than me or anyone else expected him to when the 2019 season began. So it was a season that finished about where we thought they would, but somewhere in the middle was a lot better than we all expected. So I have to say, pleasantly surprised. It was a much more enjoyable season than I expected it to be when it started. So let's get into it tonight and break down some things that happened in 2019 and just take a look back at the Texas Rangers from the 2019 baseball season. Before we move on, let me mention that the Ranger Report is actively looking for sponsorship opportunities for people that would like to help sponsor this podcast. You can go to therangerreport.com and click on sponsorship. You can email Ben at therangerreport.com if you're interested. You can also find us on Facebook and send me a message. Anyway, we'd like to contact you guys. We'd love for you to be able to sponsor us if you're interested in that at all. And again, I've mentioned already, but the Patreon account is another way that you can help this stay on the air. All right, let's talk about the good of the 2019 season, and that starts at the top of the rotation with Mike Minor and Lance Lynn. Most of the season, we looked at Mike Minor as the guy in the rotation. Mike Minor was the ace. Mike Minor was the guy we all looked to, but believe it or not, Lance Lynn had slightly better statistics than Mike Minor. Mike Minor was 14-10 with a 3.59 ERA. Lance Lynn was 16-11 with a 3.67 ERA. When it comes to innings pitched, both of the gentlemen had 208.1 innings pitched, which is fantastic. Both guys over 200 innings. As far as runs, Minor gave up 86, Lynn gave up 89. Earned runs, Minor gave up 83, Lynn gave up 85. Here's one big difference. Minor gave up 30 home runs, while Lance Lynn only gave up 21 home runs. And then Minor walked 68, while Lance Lynn walked 59. Minor, of course, controversial strikeout number 200, as you guys remember. And Lance Lynn had 246 strikeouts. So I would say that both of them had a really good season, especially if you look at the way that the team went this year. I'd say that Mike Minor and Lance Lynn were definitely your aces this year. I'd say that both of them had a fantastic season. Both of them were great. Both of them showed off some really impressive stuff during the season. Jose Leclerc started off terrible, but he finished the season pretty well with a 4.33 ERA. He had 14 saves on the season, which is the most on the team. He pitched 68.2 innings, and he got 100 strikeouts in those 68.2 innings. So, again, pretty good. Leclerc started very poorly, as did Jesse Chavez, but both of them finished out pretty well after all that. Adrian Sampson took a step forward earlier in the season and then took a step back. The Drew Smiley experiment, not so good. But I'd say on the good, as far as pitching goes, I would say we have to look at Mike Minor, Lance Lynn, and then you look at the way that Jose Leclerc finished the season, and it was pretty impressive. On the offensive side, I would say that Elvis Anders, with a 275 batting average, he had 12 home runs, 72 RBI, and he led the team in stolen bases with 31. Only DeShields was close with 24. But I'd say that he had a very good season. Elvis Anders, of course. Also, Willie Calhoun, when he got called up, looked great. He batted .269, which again is really good. Nomar Mazara finished with a 268 batting average, but he didn't look great all season long. Shin-Soo Choo was consistent as always with a 265 batting average, but a 371 on-base percentage. Choo I didn't think that was a really good signing when they got him. I wasn't real happy with him, but this year he really paid off. Choo had a great season. Then, of course, surprisingly enough, with 511 plate appearances and a 283 batting average, would be Danny Santana. This is a guy who pretty much came out of nowhere and dominated for the Rangers this year. He really did. 28 home runs, 81 RBIs, 21 stolen bases, slugging percentage of .534, an OPS of .857, 253 total bases. On and on. A pretty amazing season for Danny Santana. Not one I saw. He also had 6 triples, by the way. Not one that anyone saw coming at the beginning of the season, but I have to tip my hat to him. It was a really good season for him. Joey Gallo, of course, down on at-bats. He only had 241 at-bats this season, but in those 241 at-bats, he was batting .253, and he walked 52 times and only struck out 114. So that is definitely a much better season than anyone expected from Joey Gallo. It's too bad that it was cut short. And then, of course, Hunter Pence was also great, but missed a lot of the season due to injury. He only had 286 at-bats, but he batted .297 while he was in there. So Hunter Pence had a resurgent year. Probably could have got comeback player of the year had it not been for the just all the trouble and injury problems that he had. I would say, again, in the good, you would have to look at the new manager, Chris Woodward. He was fantastic. I think the team really bought into what he was trying to sell in the 2019 season, and it really showed in the middle of the season, but as injuries started happening and younger guys started contributing more to the team, there was only so much they could do because they did not have the kind of talent it took to beat some of the teams that they were playing. And overall, it was better than expected, I would say, for the guys that we just talked about there. There were a couple other young guys who looked pretty good. Nick Solet came up, and he did pretty good, batting .293 in limited plate appearances. He had 126 plate appearances, I believe. 135, and 116 official at-bats. Batted .293. So not bad for Nick Solak either. So that is kind of, you take away the good, and of course taking the last series from the Yankees is another good, as if you're a longtime Ranger fan, you know how we all feel about taking series from the Yankees. Let's move on to the bad. Should we start with pitching? Let's start with pitching on the bad. Ariel Harado had some good innings, but he had some bad innings as well. He finished with an ERA of .581 in 32 games. He started 18. He had a record of 7-11, and sometimes he looked good, sometimes he looked really, really bad. Not great. Adrian Sampson started looking decent, finished really bad. Colby Allard had his moments of looking good, but he's young. I wouldn't really put him in the bad. I just put him in the needs more work, which we all knew. The Edison Volquez experiment didn't work out very well for us. So on the pitching side, really, that is what we're looking into. The Rangers didn't have any guys who were awful other than Drew Smyly, who was terrible. He finished his Ranger career in 13 games with an ERA of .842. That's not what you want to see out of anybody pitching on your team, especially not someone who pitched 51 innings. Not good. On the offensive side, I've already mentioned it, and we'll start there. Rougned Odor, probably his worst season in the majors. He had 522 at-bats. He just barely broke a batting average of .200 with a .205 average. His on-base percentage was only .283, His slugging percentage was under 500 at .439. He did have 30 home runs, but he only walked 52 times, and he struck out, just a moment, don't you love it when your phone resets while you're looking at this, and he struck out 178 times, ladies and gentlemen. .205 batting average, which he had an amazing September to raise his batting average to .205. Other problem, besides Rougned Odor, and there's a lot to talk about with Rougned Odor, we'll get into that later. I don't know if he can be fixed. We'll have to wait and see. Jeff Mathis, who had 228 at-bats, batted .158 with a slugging percentage of .224 and an on-base percentage of .209. So Jeff Mathis, who just did not look good at all behind the plate, or I'm sorry, he did look good behind the plate, did not look good at all at the plate, was another huge disappointment this year. I wouldn't call Asdrubal Cabrera a huge disappointment, but the Rangers made the decision to part ways with him. And then a few other guys as well. So that was the bad, and especially, again, Rougned Odor. I mean, let's just harp on that for a minute. This is a guy who should have taken a huge step forward after the year he had last year, but took a huge step back, and rumor coming out of the Rangers organization was that he was not listening to people trying to help him. He was saying he could work it out himself, and like I said, if it wasn't for his September, then he would have finished with a sub-200 batting average, playing almost a full season, which is unacceptable. I mean, his batting average is almost unacceptable anyway at .205, but, just not impressive. Another bad one, Ronald Guzman at .219, but he did have a .723 OPS and a .414 slugging percentage. Only 10 home runs, 36 RBI, 256 plate appearances. So another one who did not have the greatest of seasons. He got sent down for a while to try to work that out. And the Rangers, just didn't know what to do. Logan Forsyth, .227, also not great. Logan Forsyth only had 7 home runs with 367 plate appearances. So again, not a great season for Logan as well, but I don't know that the Rangers really expected a ton out of Logan Forsyth. And they didn't get a ton out of Logan Forsyth. So that is the good, and that is the bad. And the ugly kind of goes along with the bad with Odor's batting average. With all of the injuries, probably the ugly is Hunter Pence and Joey Gallo would be the two biggest injuries that the Rangers sustained here at the end of the season that probably derailed any chance they had of trying to finish the season with a winning record. Gallo, again, was having a good season before he got hurt. Hunter Pence was having a really good season before he finally got hurt and went down. I mean, he had 316 plate appearances before he finally went down. So Santana, of course, had 511. So it would have been nice to have Pence for the whole season. Again, I think he could have won Comeback Player of the Year, but the ugly was all of the injuries that the Rangers sustained and all of the ineffectiveness of some of the players that wound up getting sent down to try to work things out in the minor leagues. So I think that's the good, and that's the bad, and that's the ugly from the 2019 baseball season. Love to hear from you. What's your opinion? Did I miss anyone on good, bad, or ugly? Did I miss anything? What was something that stood out to you as far as the season went, as far as good or bad? What was something that you wanted to see or didn't want to see, or something you want me to talk about that I didn't mention on this one? Let me know. But that is our look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of the 2019 Texas Rangers baseball season. So the off-season has now officially begun. We've gotten through our good, bad, and ugly from the season. So, what do the Rangers need to do in the 2019 off-season, coming into the 2020 season? We've had some time to evaluate some young guys, so we need to figure out if they are going to make the team, what's going to happen. But I think the biggest concern for me, and probably for every Rangers fan out there, is the need for pitching. And we'll start looking into what's available out there in upcoming episodes of this podcast. But we have Minor and we have Lynn. After that, it's kind of a wash right now, and we need some guys. We are moving into that brand new, supposedly beautiful Globe Life field across the street. We're going to be playing in air conditioning, so the odds are we can get free agents, but we have to spend the cash to get free agents. Are the Rangers going to be willing to spend the cash it will take to bring in premier free agent pitchers? Do they need a number 1? Do they need a number 4? Do they need someone in between? What are the Rangers willing to spend to bring in someone that's going to help this team win going forward? So as we continue this podcast and start doing our off-season stuff, breaking down what the Rangers need, breaking down who's available, and breaking down the money it's going to take to bring them in, we will look at the odds of whether the Rangers will bring in any of these people or whether it's just not going to happen. There will be a good deal of free agents out there, free agent pitching, some free agent hitting. I know they're already rumored to be interested in Kris Bryant if the Cubs decide to trade him, and that would sure up things on the third base side for the Texas Rangers. Since Beltran retired, they tried Asdrubal Cabrera, they tried a few other people, and they haven't found anything that they really like there at third base yet. So Kris Bryant would be good if the price is right and if we don't have to give up the entire farm to bring him to Texas. But my number 1 need, if I was a general manager for the Texas Rangers, would definitely be pitching. We need help in the starting rotation. We need help in the bullpen. And then we need some of those guys in the minors to prove whether they can pull it off or not, whether they can pitch at the next level. Hopefully we'll talk to some minor league pitchers over the winter break as we go through all this. Hopefully we'll also talk to some writers and some other people that can help us break down what the needs of the Rangers are this offseason and what the experts think is going to happen with the Rangers, if they think they're going to bring anybody in or if they think we're going to hold tight and go with Lynn, Minor, and then a mishmash of guys that are already in the system. The Rangers took a shot at 3 guys last year, and Drew Smyly, Edison Volquez, and Lance Lynn. And of course, Lance Lynn paid off very, very well. Smyly and Volquez did not pay off at all in the long run. Of course, Volquez injury trouble, and then finally I think he's retiring here at the end of the season. And Smyly just did not ever catch on, did not ever have a good game for the Rangers, and just looked bad. He was a guy we were rooting for coming off surgery, but it just didn't happen for him, and it was a real shame. So pitching would be my number 1 thing going forward in the season, and I'm sure most of you out there will probably agree, because they always say you can't win championships without pitching. You look at the Houston Astros right now, their rotation is just ridiculous with Justin Verlander, with Zach Greinke, and with everyone else they have going there. They are just a ridiculous rotation of arms that will dominate all the way through the postseason. They would be my pick this year to win the World Series unless something happens. I don't think that anyone is going to beat Houston here in 2019. So my prediction will be that Houston will win the World Series this year. So there you have it. I didn't mean to give a prediction on tonight's episode, but there you have it. I think Houston's going to win it all again, which means 2 World Series championships in the last 3 years. Since they rebuilt and did a fine job putting together a championship-style team like the Rangers did back in 2010. But, of course, the Rangers never did get that ultimate goal. So pitching, and then we have to solve third base. We have to figure out what to do with our large group of outfielders, who's going to stay, who's going to go, who we think will work. This is the last year on Shin-Soo Choo's deal. Is he going to play a lot of outfield? Is he going to DH? That's something the Rangers have to decide. If they're going to move him to permanent DH, or is he going to still play some outfield for this team? They have to decide what to do behind the plate. Is Isaiah Kiner-Falefa ready to be the full-time guy? Do they need to bring in someone else? Are they going to try going with Falefa and Jeff Mathis again this year? What is the plan going to be for that? We'll have to wait and see what the Rangers do. Personally, I think letting Robinson Chirinos walk was a bad idea. He's had a really good year in Houston. He's still playing, of course, in the playoffs. Has a great shot to win the World Series with the Astros this year, as I just mentioned a moment ago. They let Martin Perez go. He had a pretty decent year with Minnesota, who is, again, also still in the playoffs right now, playing in the ALDS against the New York Yankees. So a lot of things the Rangers have to consider during this offseason. They've already announced that they're keeping their entire coaching staff from the 2019 season. I think that is a good thing. The coaching staff did a good job with these players. The players, again, as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, seem to have bought in to everything that the coaching staff was selling them. They seemed to really mesh well with the team. The team looked loose. The team looked like they got along and had a good time with each other this year, which is something that I think you need on a championship team is guys that get along. Nobody in there that is really tearing up that dugout or destroying the personalities or destroying the camaraderie in that dugout. So I think retaining the coaching staff was a good move. So going forward, we will look and see what the Rangers do. The next podcast following this one is going to be a goodbye to you kind of Globe Life Park look back. And like I said, please look on our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, and call in and leave a voice message for me, sharing with me some of your favorite Globe Life Park memories. I would love to have 5, 6, 7, 8 of those, maybe more, to share with our audience on the next podcast, which is going to be a look back at some of the great memories in Globe Life Park over the last 25 years or so that it's been open. On a side note, Globe Life Park opened the year, or it was called the Ballpark at Arlington, opened the year that I graduated from high school, so that tells you that I'm old. But anyway, I think it'll be fun to do an episode just looking back at everything, and I hope to speak to a few people on that episode that have covered the Rangers there for several years and get their opinion of what they think about the end of Globe Life Park and what they think they're looking forward to, other than air conditioning, on Globe Life Field. That ought to do it for tonight's episode. I appreciate you listening. If you like it, share it, tweet it out, put it on Facebook, tell your friends about it, and of course, become a patron. You can go to patreon.com/The Ranger Report, and there are many options there for you to come on and help support this podcast. And of course, contact me if you would like to help host or co-host an episode of this podcast. I'm always looking for other motivated, happy, and excited Ranger fans to come on here and just talk Rangers with me, so that would be great. Also, you can find us facebook.com/The Ranger Report, The Ranger Report on Twitter. You can find us on Tumblr, on Pinterest, if you're into that sort of thing. We're all over the place. Plus, this podcast can be found on Anchor, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, on Stitcher, on Slacker, and pretty much anywhere else that you can find podcasts. You can find the new Ranger Report podcast. So look it up, listen, give it a like, subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. And we would love to have you share it and tell your friends about it. We are going to try to grow it leaps and bounds this year. I'm thinking about making the Ranger Report a podcast-only site because the writing side is not easy. It takes a lot of work, and I am not a professional writer, but, I'm a teacher for a living, so I am a professional talker, and I appreciate you guys anytime you listen, anytime you share, and anytime you tell other people about the Ranger Report podcast. So, the season is over, and this podcast is over as well. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time on the new Ranger Report podcast. Welcome to the new Ranger Report podcast. I am your host, Ben Dieter. Always glad when you take a little time during your week to listen to the new Ranger Report podcast. I would like to thank all of you for listening. Our numbers are growing, and I appreciate that. We've got a lot to talk about on this evening's show. But first of all, if you want to listen to us more or on different areas, I can tell you can find us on Anchor, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Radio Public, and many more. So those are all the places that you can find the Ranger Report podcast. And We really enjoy doing this. We really are glad that our listenership is going up, and there just aren't enough podcasts out there exclusively about the Texas Rangers. There are a lot of podcasts out there, obviously, and I appreciate you for taking some of your time and giving it to this podcast. So, what do we have to talk about on tonight's episode? Well, we're going to start off here in a minute talking about the World Series and the World Series champion Washington Nationals. And then we're going to talk a little bit about breaking news that came out, I believe, yesterday. Today we're recording this on November 8th, 2019, about Nolan and Ryan no longer being with the Astros organization and what that could potentially mean for the Texas Rangers. We'll talk a little bit about free agency as well as what the team needs to do in free agency. We'll talk about maybe will Globe Life Field make a huge difference? We're going to introduce something that we'll be doing over the winter about the greatest Rangers of all time in each position. We'll talk about this week in Rangers history, and then we will wrap it up. That is the plan for this episode of the new Ranger Report podcast. So thank you for tuning in and listening. Let's talk a little bit about the World Series champion Washington Nationals. Nobody thought that the Washington Nationals would win the World Series, let's be honest. The Nationals were the oldest team in baseball this year. And what did they do? They did nothing but beat probably the best team in baseball, the Houston Astros, for a World Series championship. And they did it in historic fashion. No team ever has won every road game and lost every home game in a 7-game series in American sports history. So the Nationals, and what was one reason they did that? Well, I think one reason they were able to do that is they didn't panic because they were in their mid-30s, most of them. Their average age was 30.8. That's not normal for a team that wins the World Series. Yes. So they had a different perspective. Maybe they had less panic. And the Astros had been there before, which meant that they should have won. And as a Texas Rangers fan, I know I'm supposed to hate the Astros. I don't hate them, but I'm also not completely heartbroken that they lost the World Series. The Washington Nationals as the oldest team, and they also had other things. So let's look at the differences between the World Series winning Washington Nationals and the non-playoff Texas Rangers, since this is the new Ranger Report podcast. Let's look. The Nationals had let's see, what's the same? The Nationals had a older outfielder who played really well in the series, and I would compare him to Shin-Soo Choo, and he played very well in the series. The Nationals had a 1 and 2 in the rotation that is really good and hard to beat. I would call them both aces when you're talking about Strasburg and then Scherzer. The Rangers, while they have a good 1 and 2 and a much better 1 and 2 last year than we expected in Mike Minor and Lance Lynn, they are not what I would consider big-time aces, for the Texas Rangers. They're not on the same level as those two guys I just mentioned. The Nationals made it as a wild card. They did not win their division. They swept the Cardinals, so right there I like them as a Rangers fan who has been doing this for a long time and has been doing it since before the 2011 World Series, which is something I still don't talk about, Game 6. I will not reference it. I will not talk about it. I do not like it. And no, I will never get over it, if you were wondering. The Nationals also had some young players. They have Rendon at third base, right? Rendon is someone that I might talk about later. The Rangers should show interest in, maybe showing interest in. I'm not sure. It just depends. I think their number one priority should be pitching, not fielders, but we'll get to that a little bit later in the podcast. So the Nationals did everything differently. They didn't do it the way that everyone expected a World Series champion to do it. Like I said, lost all 3 home games, won all 4 road games, the oldest team in baseball. So it was an interesting World Series. One thing I'll say, as a person who wasn't a fan of either team, I got to sit back and really enjoy the World Series because it's fun to watch when you don't really have a rooting interest. You just want to see a good series, and we got to see a very good World Series. The 7th inning seemed to be the the big inning for the Nationals in the last few games of the series. And of course, the decision with not putting in Garrett Cole and taking out Zach Greinke will probably go down in history as, as backseat drivers or people that look back will say it was a bad decision. But apparently, AJ Hinch and Garrett Cole talked about it before the game. He wasn't comfortable coming in during an inning. He wanted to start an inning. So why didn't he leave Zach Greinke in? And of course, he gets paid a lot of money to be the manager, and I don't. So he had his reasons. It didn't work out that time, but if it would have worked out, we all would have talked about what a genius AJ Hinch was to make that move when he did during the 7th inning. So there you have it. The Nationals are champions. Congratulations to them and their fan base. I have an uncle who is a big fan of the Nationals, so congratulations to him. All in all, it was a great series. It was super enjoyable to watch. And the National League took back the World Series by beating the Houston Astros 4-3. So, what a great World Series. What an enjoyable World Series. Normally, I only talk about the Rangers on this podcast, but when the World Series just ends, you have to kind of talk about it a little bit, right? It was a great World Series. Really enjoyed it. Let's move on to news that broke not very long ago. I think yesterday or the day before. The Round Rock Express has parted ways with President Reed Ryan, who is the son of Hall of Fame pitcher Nolan Ryan. Reed Ryan has been running Round Rock for a while. I covered Round Rock a couple years back, I think 2013 maybe. I went down there and covered Round Rock for a little while, and during that process I met both Reed Ryan. Nolan was there. I went on Jackie Moore when he got retired. His number got, or he got put in the Hall of Fame. My bad, for Round Rock. So it was a fun night all around. But Reed is a very smart baseball guy, and of course Nolan. We know when he was with Texas, they went to the World Series. When he was with Houston, they went to the World Series. Don't know if he has anything to do with it. You ask most Rangers fans, they'll tell you it was Nolan, not JD, that got the Rangers to the World Series. I'm not going to say which one I subscribe to because I want to keep friends on both sides of that issue. Seeing that listens are what I'm going for, I really don't want to tick anybody off. But now that they've let him go, Rangers fans are already asking, can the Texas Rangers bring back Nolan Ryan? Can we put him back in the fold as a Texas Ranger consultant or a front office person or whatever else we could put him in, a pitching coordinator, a pitching... I can't think of the word. As a pitching organizer or someone that just helps out. Consultant, thank you. My producer pointed at me and said consultant. That was the word I was looking for. So, could we bring him back in as a pitching consultant? Well, I'll be blunt with my thoughts. This means nothing. I am not around the team every day. I am a armchair manager, armchair general manager, armchair player coordinator, armchair scout. I don't actually get paid to do any of this or have the knowledge that the guys who do all that kind of work have. But my opinion is the Rangers will not get Nolan Ryan, and I think his relationship with John Daniels probably will hinder or stop that from happening. But, as Jeff Wilson of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram tweeted out, that does not mean the Rangers should not kick the tires on Reed Ryan. The odds that Reed Ryan will come to the Rangers, I think, are a lot higher than the odds of Nolan Ryan. And if Reed comes, then at least you'll have Nolan around again with his son helping to do things. And I don't know in what role the Rangers would bring in Reed Ryan. I don't know what they would have for him, but I bet you that if he showed interest in coming to the Rangers, they would find a place for him pretty quick, would be my opinion. And if I were them, and once again, armchair general manager here, I would want Reed Ryan in the fold of the Texas Rangers. So, Nolan didn't really give the reason why he and Reed got let go, but he did say that he is leaving the Astros and he'll leave it at that. So, read into that what you want, read into that what you may. Nolan and Reed Ryan are no longer with the Houston Astros, so Rangers fans are going to all get their hopes up now and want them to come to the Rangers, and of course I do as well, but just covering this for a long time, I don't know that Nolan and John Daniels will be able to come together and do what they need to do to make this work after the way he left here years ago after the 2 World Series. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. We'll keep you up on whatever happens with Reed and Nolan Ryan over the next few weeks as we do our podcasts. And we will talk to Jeff Wilson of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram on our next podcast, so be sure to listen in for that. Tons of insight. Really enjoy talking to him. Looking forward to getting down to business with him and seeing what the Rangers need to do in free agency, because he is someone that does cover the team every day, someone that is in the business and knows what he's talking about, and it's always refreshing and it's always informative to talk to him, so be sure not to miss that. Let's shift gears and talk a little bit about free agency and the Texas Rangers. Now, the number one need for the Rangers, according to everyone in the world who has watched this team and who watched them play, and especially who watched them pitch last year, knows that the Texas Rangers' number one need right now is definitely pitching. So, let's take a look at the top 20 free agent pitchers and see which one the Rangers, number one, have a chance at, number two, are interested in, and see what we can figure out, and see if I can give you some predictions, sure to not be right. So that's what I always like to do. I like to give you predictions. I like to get them wrong. It's a lot of fun. Again, not an expert, but I really enjoy doing this. And of course, I would love to see your list. You can always tweet me, as I did not mention off the top of the show, at The Ranger Report. You can find The Ranger Report on Facebook. You can find us lots of other places. My email address is ben@therangerreport.com. Feel free to shoot me an email telling me how right I am, how wrong I am, what you would do. And then, of course, if you go to Anchor and go to the Ranger Report podcast, there is a place where you can record a voice message for the podcast, and I will put the best ones on air, and I will answer some of them if you have questions for me. Love to hear from you guys. I do this because I enjoy it, but hopefully you enjoy it as well. All right, let's talk about the top 20 free agent pitchers or so coming out in 2020. All right, the number one pitcher coming out is Garrett Cole. I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on this. He's going to demand $20 trillion, and he will probably earn it from someone. So Garrett Cole, of course, 29 years old. Astros did really good last year. But he did really well, not as well. Well, he did really well in the postseason. Garrett Cole, great pitcher. That is a big no to me. The Rangers do not have a shot of signing Garrett Cole. Number two, Madison Bumgardner. Madison Bumgardner of the San Francisco Giants. I believe that Madison Bumgardner will probably stay in San Francisco. Maybe the Rangers will kick the tire on him, but Madison Bumgardner is getting a little older. Not quite the pitcher he was a long time ago. Interesting. I just don't know if the Rangers are going to be interested in him. Zach Wheeler is the next one, number three, 30-year-old pitcher with the Mets right now. Been in the majors for 5 seasons. He has had a pretty good stint there with the New York Mets. I have not heard him referenced to the Rangers right now. I have not heard him. I've not heard any rumors that he would be going to the Rangers, so not sure about that one. I don't think that's going to happen at this time. All right, next, if I can get back to my wonderful list, will be Steven Strasburg. Steven Strasburg is staying in Washington. I don't think we have to say anything else about that. After him, we have Cole Hamels. Cole Hamels, there is an interesting one. Let's take a moment and talk about Chicago Cubs pitcher Cole Hamels, who left a year and a half ago via trade from the Rangers to go to the Cubs. He is an aging superstar, not quite as good as he once was, if you want to quote an old country song there. He's not as good as he once was. But here's the thing. The Rangers have done well with people like him. He and the Rangers had a really good relationship. Call me sentimental, but I would like to see Cole Hamels back in a Rangers uniform for maybe a 1 or 2 year deal. Pitching at Globe Life Field along with Mike Minor and Lance Lynn. I feel like he would be a much more solid number 3 than anything we had, of course, in the 2019 season. I don't think he'll be as expensive as, say, a Zach Wheeler or Garrett Cole or even some other people we're going to talk about later down on this list. Cole Hamels is one I'd want to keep my eyes on. Cole Hamels is one that if I was the general manager and I could work it out, I would definitely say yes to Cole Hamels coming to the Rangers. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm sentimental, but I would really like to see Cole pitching for the Rangers once again. So, Hamels is a interesting one to me. That is the first one on my list of yes, I could see it happening. Next, we have Rick Porcello. Rick Porcello, of course, pitched for the Boston Red Sox. Are the Red Sox going to keep him? I don't know. But again, he's another one I think is going to cost too much, and the Rangers aren't going to be very interested in. All right, Dallas Caico, who took forever to sign last year, which was interesting after having some great seasons with the Houston Astros. He did not have the greatest of seasons last year. He was not the superstar that he was while he was in Houston. So it will be interesting to see how much interest he draws out there, and if he draws any interest at all from the Texas Rangers. If I were John Daniels, I would probably kick the tires on that and see what you could get or what you could get him for. But other than that, I don't see that being a big deal now. The next pitcher has been rumored that the Rangers are super interested in it. Hinjin Ryu, and I may have said that wrong, and I apologize if I butchered it. But he finished 2018 with a 1.97 ERA. He also capped a 5-year stretch in which injuries limited him to 66 starts. So, Ryu or Ryu, however you say that, I'm sorry to everyone that I can't pronounce that name, but he is a guy that the Rangers are said to be very interested in, according to several sources that I've read. A guy that the Rangers really want to bring in. He would be good. He would be a good pitcher to bring in. I think he's one that definitely I would say yes to. Definitely, I think there's a good chance he winds up playing in Arlington. Because remember, once again, we have money to spend this year because we haven't spent it over the last few years. So the Rangers have a good shot of bringing in somebody. And I think so far Hamels and Ryu are the two guys that I would consider not shoo-ins, but a good chance that the Rangers would bring them in. Aroldis Chapman, I would say no on that one. I don't think the Rangers show any interest in him. Kenley Jansen, again, don't think the Rangers show any interest in Jansen. Yasmani Grandal, haven't heard his name linked to the Rangers at all. Dylan Bedence, sorry about that again. I hadn't heard Will Smith. I heard a little bit on Will Smith, but I still don't think that the Rangers bring him in. Jake Odorizzi is another one who maybe kick the tires on, see what you can get him for, but I don't think the Rangers are highly interested in that. Let's just run down now some other free agents on the list. You got Felix Hernandez. He is past his prime. I don't think I'd be interested. Now let's move past some pitchers. Well, you got Trevor Cahill. You got Ivan Nova as well. So let's look at some non-pitchers. You have Edwin Encarnacion. I don't know. Personally, because of his years with Toronto, I don't like him. And there's another guy we'll talk about in a minute here that I don't like that the Rangers are interested in. But you know what? To be honest with you, I didn't think Adrian Beltran was going to be a good fit when he moved to Texas, and we all know how that worked out. So I was 120% wrong on that one. Maybe this person that I'm talking about will work out better. We'll look at him in just a minute. I know they've showed some interest in Encarnacion, but I don't really think that he's someone that they'll take seriously. So, and of course, the third baseman for the Washington Nationals has also been brought up, but my understanding is the Rangers are looking for someone to just fill that spot for a couple of years, because we have guys in the minors that will get ready to come up that we will also talk about on later episodes. So free agent pitching. Now let's look at the man I was talking about that after his time with the Blue Jays I really didn't like, and that was Josh Donaldson. There are some Rangers fans that I've read on Twitter and on articles that seem kind of excited about the possibility of bringing Josh Donaldson to Texas. Again, don't like him. Of course, I remember the big fight, with Rougned Odor that Donaldson was involved in as well, even though he didn't get the punch in the face that his good buddy did there. Donaldson, I don't know. Personally, I don't like him. He brings an edge that the Rangers don't normally have. They're a loose bunch, and I don't know that bringing his edge and his type of play would be exactly what the Rangers need. But again, I could be wrong. I mean, I am not perfect. I don't know it all. But I personally don't like him very much, but if he can come in and help the Rangers win, then who am I to stand in his way? I'm just an armchair quarterback, for the lack of a better word, an armchair general manager. I know the Rangers are showing interest in him. I don't know if he has interest in coming here or not, but we will talk about that more and update it as we hear more. Next week, when I talk to Jeff Wilson, we'll talk about who he thinks is going to come and who he thinks will go. I have a feeling if there's an odd man out this year, it might be Nomar Mazara. He might be on the outs just because they're pretty stacked in the outfield right now. The Rangers may be able to dump Shin-Soo Choo's contract on someone and trade him during the offseason or during the season. But, again, Choo had a great late year last year. It's the last year of his contract. I would prefer that he stay in Texas. Again, sentimental reasons. I'm an old softy. So we know what the team needs. We talked about that. So here's the next question I have, and I will ask Jeff Wilson this when I talk to him next week. Is Globe Life Field going to make that big of a difference having a roof? The short answer is yes. I believe we can attract more free agents knowing that it's not going to be 130 degrees on the field from mid-July until early September. I think some people have been scared off by that over the years, and I think that the Rangers are going to solve that problem with a roof. Although, as I've said many times on this podcast, I am a huge fan of Globe Life Park for lots of different reasons. Memories and, people that I went with that are no longer with us and things like that make it. And, World Series games, for crying out loud, were played in that ballpark, as well as, the Rangers won their first playoff series while playing in that ballpark, went to the World Series. We saw players like Josh Hamilton play in that place. We saw Adrian Beltran. We saw Pudge Rodriguez. We saw so many great players come through and play in Globe Life Park, and I'm going to miss it. And don't get me all sentimental about it again. But Globe Life Field, in my humble opinion, will make a difference, especially when you're talking about bringing in free agents. I think they will look at that and see that, okay, this is a place where it'll be climate controlled. There'll be no rain delays. I don't have to worry about missing a start because I'll be rained out at home. Things that that climate control will be very, very attractive to some free agencies. So yes, I do think that it is a great idea to have the covered park, although I'm buying into it. I didn't like the idea of getting rid of Globe Life Park, but I'm starting to buy into Globe Life Field simply because I think that we can build a better team. And of course, everyone's argument, including mine, is that we already went to 2 World Series without a covered ball field, without an indoor park. And while I love the sunshine, the Rangers can still open it when they want to, which is one thing I like about it. It is an open or close ballpark, and that means now 3 teams in the division have covered ballparks. Of course, Seattle, Houston, and now the Rangers will starting in 2020. So yeah, short answer, I think it will make a difference. I'll be interested to hear what Jeff Wilson has to say about it next week when we talk to him. All right, something we are going to be doing going forward on the New Ranger Report podcast, sort of a fun winter series that I'd like to talk about, is the greatest Rangers at each position. I would like to do, what I'm going to try to do, me and some other people, a top 3 at each position. So who is your number 3, number 2, number 1? Maybe have a vote on it. We'll put a poll on the Ranger Report, therangerreport.com, and also on Twitter at the Ranger Report, and probably on the Facebook page as well, asking who is the greatest at this position, and that'll be leading up to who we talk about on that episode that coming week. We're going to start with third base because I believe that one is a no-brainer shoo-in on who the greatest third baseman ever for the Rangers is. It's Hank Blaylock. I'm just teasing, it's not Hank Blaylock. But I think you guys know who I'm talking about. I will put up a poll on who I think the top 3 Rangers third basemen of all time are. And now let me give you a caveat on this. I am a man in my 40s. So I was not around in the 70s and the early to mid 80s watching Rangers baseball because I was too young to be able to watch. And of course it wasn't televised like it is today. But I will be basing mine on what I know and then also what I've read and what I've seen throughout history. So greatest Rangers at each position will be a little bit skewed by my view. So if you are a, let's just say, more seasoned fan than I am and have been watching longer, and you have some ideas on who the greatest Ranger at a position is that I left off my list, please feel free to email, tweet, Facebook, or contact me here on Anchor Podcasts on the comment section and tell me who I left out so I can include or at least consider yours in the mix as well. So that is going to be a lot of fun, I think. I'm looking forward to digging in and looking at all these positions and who I think has been the best over the years. We'll start with third base. Second will be catcher because, once again, those are probably the two easiest ones in Rangers history to put a number one exclusively and without much argument, I believe, on the number one catcher and the number one third baseman. So that is something that you have to look forward to coming up on the new Ranger Report podcast. Another segment I would like to start is a segment called This Week in Rangers History. So let's look into what happened this week in Texas Rangers history. On November 6, 2006, that would be, if I did my math right, 13 years ago, the Texas Rangers announced that Ron Washington had accepted the offer to manage the team, replacing Buck Showalter, who was fired earlier that month. Or fired a month earlier, I'm sorry. Ron Washington took over as the Rangers manager November 6th, so this week in Rangers history in 2006. And of course, as we know, he was given a good team, and he took that team. Probably the best manager record-wise in Rangers history, obviously. The most winning postseason manager in Rangers history up to date. The most inspirational Rangers manager. His players loved him and played hard for him. And of course, Wash took the Rangers to 2 World Series, was an incredibly likable guy. Had great quotes like, that's how baseball go, and other things like that he said that were just awesome, that fans loved. I used to do a podcast called the Hague Sports Podcast with my good friend Nathan Hague, who is a professional sports writer. And when we covered the Rangers one time, he actually interviewed Ron and had him say that's the way the Hague Sports go, which was fantastic. It's a clip I still love to this day. So Ron Washington became the Texas Rangers manager November 6th, 2006. So this day in Rangers history, or this week, I should say, not this day, because today's November 8th. This week in Rangers history, we had Ron Washington hired as a manager, and then, of course, last year during this week, Chris Woodward was hired as the manager, but I like to go for a little older than 1 year ago. Of course, Woodward, we don't know how Woody's going to work out yet, still new, but Wash had a great career, and I still wish him well as a coach or manager in Major League Baseball. It was great to have him, great to watch him, great to cover him from afar. Really enjoyed the man, really enjoyed listening to him talk, really enjoyed watching him manage the team. Really enjoyed the way that he played and the way he managed the game. How excited he got, waving guys around as the third base coach and him would come out from the dugout. A lot of fun. So that's what happened this week in Rangers history. All right, well, that about wraps up the Ranger Report podcast this week. I would like to address a few things here at the end that I would like you, the listener, to do if you can. We have a Patreon account, the Ranger Report on Patreon, where we are raising money to keep this thing on the air, to keep it going, where we keep it rolling, keep it going. Sorry, I just got some news on my phone about Donaldson, but nothing as important as I thought it might be. All right. So it helps us with costs of running the podcast, with doing other things that we do. And then, of course, I started a GoFundMe because I record this on some not really expensive equipment with some not really expensive microphones and there's a new machine out that I want to get that I've described on the GoFundMe. If you'll go to the Ranger Report on Twitter or go to GoFundMe and look at the Ranger Report, you will find it. I would appreciate it if you would consider donating to the cause so that we can set up a much nicer studio and do a much more professional sounding recording than what we're already doing. Not that we're doing a bad job, but the more professional you can sound, the more fun it is for me, and probably the more fun it is for you to listen to. So consider giving to our Patreon account or to our GoFundMe account. We're looking to raise about $650 to upgrade our equipment, to do some other costs, to get a few other people in here to help out. So if you could donate, I would greatly appreciate it, and I will stop promoting myself now, and I will tell you, thank you very much for listening. We would like to encourage you to listen to the next one. We will interview Jeff Wilson of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. We'll look a little bit into some other things. We'll keep talking about free agency, hot stove, and of course the winter meetings are coming up. We will be all over that as well. Thank you once again for listening to the new Ranger Report podcast.